Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And tonight we have a special guest, Darvis. I would say special because we haven't actually had very many men on the Feminine Force, so that's pretty special. Darvis has been invited on because he's following on from our conversation last week when we talked to Britt, Queen of the Wild, about the way she interacts with the natural landscape. And I felt to bring Darvis on. Darvis is 7th generation Tasmanian when his ancestors came over from Ireland. And he's just telling us that Tasmania is actually 40% World Heritage. So the wilderness is his back door. And he takes men out into the wilderness. He takes groups out into the wilderness. And the reason I've invited him on actually was because I was speaking to him last week and he said something to me after he had been working with a client of mine. And it was around healthy masculinity. It was a comment like, when a man knows his purpose and his true value, women just love that. And they can then fully embrace their femininity. And I thought, wow, we have to have a deeper conversation about this. So welcome, Darvis. It's so good to have you here.
It's really nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Welcome, Darvis. So amazing to have you. I'm very excited about this. And you look like you're actually in Ireland, not Tasmania. We were just saying, you know, you look so Irish. You've got the Irish blood in you, definitely.
You're so long cousins or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. You could be a brother. So amazing to have you.
So Darvis, I would love to know, just to start off, how, I mean, like, and you've been a guide going into the wilderness since you were 21, and, you know, as you're like 95 now, that's a really long time. I mean, joking, he's not 95, right? But he's been guiding people into the wilderness. But what I would like to know is, how did that experience, like, how has your experiences in the wilderness actually created your version of you? Like, how has it really changed the way you show up in relationships with women, for example? Like, how has it informed your version of masculinity?
Well, that's a big question and a fascinating question. Maybe I start with I start at the end and work my way back. So for anyone that's spent significant amounts of time in nature, whether we call it wilderness, I don't personally use the term wilderness. Wilderness is there's a lot of political heat around the term wilderness because it implies that a landscape, is essentially, in a traditional sense, is, devoid of humans. It's kind of like that white, in Australian context, Lisa, it was like the terra nullius. And the paradigm of wilderness is like a landscape, which is quite, in today's terms, even though it doesn't make me the most popular person within the conservation movement, it's quite clinical. So I use the language wild place, wild nature. In terms of my relationship with nature, if I start, at the simple point and work back, then we are nature. And the more time that we spend in nature, we realise, and I have realised, and I feel very comfortable making a broad brushstroke generalisation here, because it's a pretty universal experience that people have. That, we come to a recognition that spaciousness itself is the thing that is holding all matter. And it's just like a wild place just reminds us of spaciousness. We immerse ourselves within the field, if you like, of spaciousness. And because there are no other distractions, and because we're then absolutely immersed in the feminine, and what I refer to in terms of the way that I use the language feminine is that everything in the world of form is feminine. It's the fluctuating ebb and flow of impermanence. So it's like, this cup sits inside space, I sit inside space, that fireside sits inside space. Everything, if you've ever listened to Eckhart Tolle, he talks about it really succinctly. He's like, we've got the world of the formless world, which is the space holding the form, and we have the form sitting inside the space. And the reason that I feel that wild places are so impacting, and I'll come to your question in regard to how it influences me and the feminine, is that it's a reminder of ultimately what we are. You know, devoid of the distractions in day-to-day life, life perspective is attained. And the more that I've saturated myself in this particular corner in the northwest of Tassie called the Tarkine, I think what happens is that we download the consciousness of life. You know, and another way of saying that is that our nervous system merges with the consciousness of life. And so what's happened for me is that I've basically, I've just become really spacious as a human, both really spacious and present. And there's a lot of practice that underpins that as well. Lots of 10 days of sitting for Vipassana meditation and whatever to sort of back this and put some frame around it. But that spaciousness holding my own inner complexity. So in that way, I could say that the masculine is the space itself, the formless, the permanent, if you like, and my feminine is the changing form, is the moving thought, is the emotional fluidity, much like a river, you know, the impermanent state of being. And I feel like the inherent challenge that comes with, and I'm not going to make this gender specific, but I'll speak for myself and I'll speak for men that I take into the landscape. So the inherent challenge for men in going into a landscape, and I think it's really the inherent challenge for anyone, is that when met with a perceived risk in the land, the perceived risk is really high. Okay, so I'm in the middle of nowhere, and now I'm going to go solo, which is what I do with men. I support men to get out there. I provide them with all of the skills in a practical sense and give them as much as I can in terms of reflective framework and insight into place, tools, if you like. And what happens is that because the perceived risk is so high, the nervous system and the senses turn on as an act of evolutionary self-protection, right? So all of a sudden, bang, I'm in my body. I'm like, whoa, okay, edgy, out here by myself. The senses are on, and it stimulates an incredible amount of endorphins and dopamine that is our evolutionary origin, but we don't have access to in day-to-day life because we're pinned to a grindstone paying off a bloody mortgage. And I think what happens in there is that where for men, and once again, I'll let women facilitators talk for women, but for men, we're forced into a place of sharp presence in order to meet the internal chaos that's reflected by the external chaos. Mm-hmm. So the external chaos is madness, really. The Tarkine coast is insane. Like, it's such a wild, untamed landscape. And unless I can have a really great presence of being, then the place will overwhelm me and intimidate me. But if I recognize my own internal chaos and I hold it with an intensity of presence and I meet it and I lean into the challenge, then my masculine, my presence grows and I can hold my own feminine. And to answer your question, the more I can hold my own feminine, the more I can hold my lover, because I'm ultimately holding myself. I'm holding her, I'm holding space internally that she can exist within, and she can be as present if she wants, or as emotionally chaotic as she needs to be. And the more capacity that I have to hold my own internal chaos, my own internal emotion, I'm always wary about in this politically correct world, like it's so politically correct, people are triggered with every little word that you say, but that's the nature of the world that we live in. The more that I've got capacity to navigate my own internal landscape, if you like, I feel like it's an accurate generalization to say that therefore I have the capacity to hold my woman, and my woman being Brit, with all of her complexity in both her masculine and her feminine. And so for me, the beautiful thing about a relationship is the polarity that gets forged between the masculine and the feminine. You know, and that dance of polarity is ultimately one where it's always been my life experience throughout my relationships in my life, is that, you know, the one partner holds a primary masculine and one partner will hold a primary feminine. You know, which doesn't mean, and I think this is where, you know, I guess what I would refer to as the shadow side of feminism seems to insinuate that by using this kind of language, it means that there's an accusation that women don't have perfect capability to do all of this stuff themselves, which is absolutely not what I mean when I'm talking about that. Mm-hmm. You know, Brit, for example, is well more capable in her masculine in certain areas. But when it all comes down to it, and I will follow her lead, and I do follow her lead. Both I follow her masculine, and sometimes I follow her feminine. Her vulnerability, her emotional wisdom, her sensual wisdom. I'm like, that's heaps sexier and heaps better than the way that I'm doing it. You know, but when it all comes down to it, if I'm out in the middle of an ocean and I'm on a ship, and the ship metaphorically represents our relationship, and a storm is smashing us to the point of where we're on the verge of death, I'm going to be the one primarily grabbing that wheel. And I'm going to meet that intensity with aggression, because I'm aggressive. I'm aggressive. You know, and I feel like a trustworthy man is a man who can acknowledge that. And aggression owned means that aggression doesn't get converted to violence. Mm-hmm. So I'm an absolute advocate of men owning their own aggression in order that it doesn't own them. Mm-hmm. I'm a highly aggressive man in my energy, but I'm never aggressive toward humans. Mm-hmm. Never. There are times where I'm necessarily assertive, and unashamedly so in the right context, but not violent. Mm-hmm. So I feel like, yeah, that's a.
Yeah, that's amazing, actually, Darvis, because I was just thinking about that today myself. Actually, I was thinking, thinking about this conversation. I was thinking about my interpretation of, like, I suppose, the presence of a man, of a masculine man, is that you have to have a reverence for that. Like, I feel a reverence for that power, because it's like as if, I suppose for me, when we talk about the masculine and feminine, for me, you're talking about the seen and the unseen. I see it as it's like the father and the mother figure. So the father is like the formless, like you say, the unseen, which wants to come into form. It's the intention of life itself that wants to come into form. And the feminine then is it coming into form. It's creative. It's what life wants to come into form, and then the create is the masculine, and then the feminine is like it coming in. It's formed. It's created. But it's like that dance. But to know that, I suppose, when you're a woman, you have a certain amount of power, and it is very, very much linked in and co-creative with the masculine. But when you're talking about the aggression part of it there, and that I can really sense that with men that have a hold of that and have it in right relationship. Yeah. So they are holding it, they have it embodied in themselves. So they know their own power. They know where they are in the world and what they're capable of, but they have the control of their own, of where they're going to direct that, So that's very powerful in the world. And it's very powerful for women to understand that as well, because that's a hugely creative force, and it can do an awful lot of good in the world, and it can make huge change when it's directed in the right way, you know. And I think there's a huge reverence and honoring of that. I think personally, I think that I feel that, you know, if there's a space that needs to be kind of created for that, you know. So sometimes women can create that space for the man to be able to do that, you know. And I think sometimes to allowing that, you know, that they're actually also giving the feminine guidance, you know, and the knowledge of the sensing. And because, like, for me as well, it's like the sensing is very important from the feminine side, because you personally, like, you know, you talk about harmony, you know, when you're talking about linking back into nature and being one with nature and having that inner spaciousness, that's when you're kind of in harmony with nature again, that you're one with the consciousness of nature as such. So for me, when I get guided by that, so when I get that information, and then if I can pass that on to the masculine, then it informs him again on another level, maybe that he hasn't access to in as much as sensitivity, you know. But I think the honoring of what the masculine can bring into the world is something it's a huge energy, you know. It's a massive so it's kind of that dance, like you say, between the two. And what's really interesting is what life wants to create through that marriage of the two, you know. And yeah, that's exciting for when you talk about purpose, because how you can help each other co-create that, you know. And I think that's really, I don't know about you, you know, it's interesting with yourself and Britt as well, because you're very on purpose together. And how do you feel that works, and has that kind of helped fire both of your passions because of the connection? Have you found that has helped with your own purpose, like from a male point of view?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Yes, is the long story short, enormously. And because I feel like maybe that it's interesting trying to prescribe masculine or feminine qualities to certain parts of ourselves. Do you know what I mean? Like, because ultimately the way that I look at it is, you know, that spaciousness itself, like space, is masculine, and everything else is just impermanence form. But so, like, I'm kind of you know, reluctant to prescribe certain personality qualities or whatever as being masculine or feminine in some ways, but more so I like looking at it as in terms of the dynamic between the two.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, in terms of the question, Britt's incredibly focused as a person of purpose. I think that my relationship with her has really clarified that for her. I'm going to have to ask her that, actually. I don't had done like a lot of conscious, you know, this is my purpose work prior to being in relationship with me. I know she's done an enormous amount of work around that, but like, I'm always someone that's probing for that, because basically what I feel is that, you know, the creative energy that exists inside of you, the creator that you are, with your brilliant ideas and your visions and what you see in the world, you are the evolutionary pulse of life. You're it. Right, and if you and if I and if we can become conscious and we can use language to articulate the creative energy, then there's an integration of mind and being, if you like. And for me, that integration is just transcendental. It's enormously empowering. Like when anyone gets to a crystal clear point of purpose, to the degree that they can say, my purpose is that I'm a bridge between nature and culture. My purpose is to be a bridge between nature and culture. And how I achieve that is to stay spacious. I mimic nature. I listen. I'm here. I'm not thinking about something else. I'm just completely here. And so that's what I mean by purpose. And so with Britt, she gets that, you know, she's a midwife to soul. That's her thing. And in terms of our relationship, the way that I look at purpose, and in fact the way that I work with men to get to purpose, the first thing that I say is that purpose is really easy to find. It's like it's right in front of your nose. It's right there. It's always been right there. You're living it every single day. You're just not applying curiosity to the. You're not asking the question, right? And you're not reflecting with someone as an archetypal guide that will jam it out with you. But purpose is like a shooting star. Shooting stars aren't rare. They're happening if I was to go outside tonight and stare at the sky for 3 hours, I'll see 25, 30 shooting stars. The thing that's rare is looking. Yeah. And so the purpose conversation has just become this mythological kind of like unattainable thing, and it's complete bullshit. It's like, with Ronnie, Lisa sent Ronnie my way, an absolute legend of a dude, and I spent a solo week with him in the Tarkine, to support him to get onto purpose. And I said to him within 5 minutes of being here, I said, "We'll have your purpose by the end of the week crystallized, mate." No, and he's just like, "What? You can't?" I'm like, "Of course you can. You're just not looking, mate." It's a no-brainer. But in terms of the multiple layers of that, the way that I look at it is that the first thing in terms of priority that I feel like we should be having as a culture is asking the question of what's your legacy? So at the moment that you take your last few dying breaths, which is inevitable, we're all going to do it, and rather than avoiding thinking about it, go straight through the door. So that at the point that death comes for me, I'm ready. And now plan my entire life around having a beautiful death, one that I'm proud of, so that by the time I start choking out or seizing up or whatever the hell's happening in my death, and let's pray that it's a reasonably peaceful one, that all of me is present and I'm going out with no regrets. So legacy, okay, great. What do I leave? Vision, next level. What do I see? What do I see that the world needs? There's a whole bunch of clues in there in terms of my purpose. Okay, if this is the world that I see, if this is the unfiltered creative vision that I see the world needs in terms of the evolution of life, then what do I need to do that, to achieve that? What can I do? Let's just jam it out. Just have a crack, jam it out, all the ideas. Oh, I could do this and this and this, great. So if I was doing all of those things, who would I need to be in order to do that in alignment with my legacy? And as far as my relationship with Brit is concerned, where it's become an enormous value add is that the alignment of our legacy and our vision and our mission and our purpose is seamless. Like, it's kind of ridiculous, really. Like, I've known Brit as a friend for a number of years, and it's only been in the last couple of years that we've become romantic. And it's just crazy. I highly recommend that if anyone's not in a relationship that's aligned deeply with their partner in purpose, if you're someone that craves for that, it's a really beautiful thing, because every single day of our lives we're working towards something that's so seamlessly calls to every cell of our being. I can't imagine there being another woman in this country that embodies that like Brit does. Like, it's, wow, look at who I'm with. This epic West Australian beach babe who's like a wild queen. She's super intelligent. She's up there gorgeous. She's completely full of heart and kindness and humility. And, that's a really beautiful thing. So it adds an enormous amount of value to the relationship.
I think it's interesting, it's actually, I'm sitting here listening to this and I'm thinking to myself, how many men do I know that know themselves well enough that I can feel this real strength of purpose and value and responsibility? And I don't know very many, I know very few. And one thing that I realized, and like somewhat, I'm hearing you talk about things probably like opposite, obviously, because you're a man and I'm a woman. But one thing that I realized is the day that I took 100% responsibility for my emotions. This day that I was just felt like I was sitting there hanging on to this archetypal unconscious thing that was like I wanted to be rescued, even though I didn't, but I could feel there was something in me unconsciously that wanted to be rescued. And I realized the day that I let that go, that would then enable any man that I was with to be able to take his armor off, because he wasn't expected to rescue me in any way anymore. Like I was 100% emotionally responsible for me.
Yeah.
So that means, because in my mind, I'm thinking, how can a man take his armor off if he's always like has to be ready to fight the dragon for the woman that needs to be rescued? Now, this is all unconscious, right? This is like consciously, I wouldn't say I wanted to be rescued, and most women wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
But emotionally, if there's that energy going on, for a man to be completely vulnerable, it would be very difficult, because, you know, if that's the underlying expectation unconsciously of a woman, and perhaps it even works the other way around, I don't know. But for me, what I'm hearing from you, it's this 100% emotional responsibility for how I am as a person, because that then means that whoever I'm with is safe on every level. I can step in and support them when I need to, because I know myself well enough. I can be this when I need to, because I know myself well enough, and I can hold a space, and I'm not reactive, you know. And that to me is like this real, that is just power, and it's strength, and like you can feel that in somebody when they're able to do that.
Totally.
So yeah, I don't know if you sort of see it like that, but that for me that's how I see that the strength that comes into a relationship and makes it co-creative.
I see it exactly like that, and I think it's really beautifully, you know, authentic and sincere. You saying that that's been your process as well. I know that there's a lot of resistance in a lot of women that I know to actually even inquire into whether that's a dynamic that they carry. That, you know, they've been looking for their kind of archetypal savior or whatever, and maybe they have, maybe they haven't. That's each person's journey, but I think it's really courageous. And 100% I agree with you, like that, and I see it identically. I use slightly different language, but the principle of the way that I see it is exactly what you just said, and it's that self-responsibility. I mean, the irony is, and the paradox and the challenge is that with a declared sense of purpose comes the responsibility to follow through and achieve it, you know. Or maybe a better way for me to put that within the language that I use, with a declared sense of, okay, this is my purpose, therefore this is my mission, there's the vision and there's my legacy. Now I'm responsible for following through with it, right? And I think that the very thing that enables me to declare that purpose is an intensely strong presence, a presence that's strong enough to hold my own self-doubt, the self-critic, the self-judge, all of these archetypal energies that are working inside me. The only way that they dominate me is if I'm not sharp enough to feel them. Thanks for sharing. You're welcome to be there, but I'm just not going to, you know, I'm just not going to feed you. You're always going to be there. And I just welcome you to the party, but the king's in control here. Yeah. And I feel like in terms of what you're pointing to there, Lisa, I think it's incredibly insightful. Is that as far as relationships are concerned, you know, it was one of the outstanding features of Britt in my relationship with her right away. I was like, wow, Britt's so epically self-responsible, right? So, which doesn't mean that she doesn't have big emotional moments and whatever, but even if she does have those moments, which I completely welcome. In fact, I find them quite sexy, to be honest. Like, I like that. I like wildness. You know, I like raw self-expression. Like, whenever Britt is wild with me like that and she's angry at me about something, I love her to show it to me, because ultimately I know that she's holding herself while she's doing that, and she's cathartic for the sake of an alchemical transformation in the dynamic and the relationship that she's taking responsibility for. And if she needs to fucking process it like that, then go to town on it, is what I say. And you can scream at me, yeah, to at the top of your lungs, and I'll hold the space. Every now and again, I'll push back and I go, no, all right, there's the boundary. But that wildness is welcome, and mostly it's welcome because I just have a deep respect for her ability to hold her own feminine. But if she, on the other hand, was in an enormous state of projection where she wasn't radically self-responsible and she was doing that on a regular occurrence, then it'd be completely exhausting and I'd walk away. So it's like, you know, for me, that the relationship has to be a value add to my purpose. Right? It needs to make life better. If it's not making my life better, I'm out. I reckon that's a pretty, you know, valuable universal principle for anyone. If this isn't making my life better, why am I here?
Yes.
If it's not taking me to that level, then there's a parallel life that I could be living with someone who, or even by myself, where my life is significantly richer and I'm growing, or I'm sitting and stagnating inside a codependent relationship.
Yeah, I think sorry. No, I think just the fact that, you know, the self-knowledge. I suppose for me, when I look and I see some, you know, couples that have done their work and really kind of investigating, done the archaeology in themselves to get to their own truth, and then I think it's fascinating the way life kind of orchestrates a meeting. Then, you know, it's like as if, you know, I always see things as kind of this was interconnected, you know, and interdependent, and it's all connected, and it all, you know, recalibrates, you know, once there's a change and a shift within somebody. And then how, like, the fact that the two of you are kind of nearly brought together for a joint purpose, that it fuels, that you fuel each other, like you were saying, you know, if it's not improving, but it should be fueling and firing up creatively, you know, your relationship should be fueling all the aspects of yourself, within yourself, your mentally, emotionally, sexually, you know, your passion, your project, that everything is like this fire, you know, that you're stoking the fire, like in the fire in front of you there, it's been stoked together, you know, you're putting it on, you're both doing your bit to kind of keep that going. And I think that's very exciting because it, like I said, it kind of, it's visceral, you feel it within your body as such, because it's kind of it ignites that purpose and passion. I think I'd say the clarity, you know, the clarity of your own vision being mirrored to you by the other person as well, kind of helps you keep on track, you know, like you're talking about your legacy, and that she's constant inspiration to you and you can see her doing her work, then it, you know, it kind of holds you accountable as well, would you say?
Yeah, and I love that analogy of the fire, and that's in fact, ironically, Caroline, that's exactly the analogy that we've used the entire time.
Okay.
The fire of our shared relationship, our love. You know, both of us wanted to step into the relationship, and it's a bit of a trip of a story in terms of how we ended up in a relationship in the first place. It's bizarre, but we wanted to step inside a relationship and have a bed of coals that had foundation and depth, but that glowed continually, rather than being this bang, flaming bonfire that one can't keep the resources. It's like I want that bed of coals to get deeper and deeper and deeper, where I know I can come to it, and every now and again we can throw on some sticks, and it ignites, you know, the passion, but that passion is ignited by the depth of the foundation of the coals. And this kind of like fleeting, you know, we've all had these romances that explode and then fizzle out. And definitely at the stage of my life, relative to how, you know, clear I am about what I'm here to do, I'm basically incredibly fussy in terms of the person that I want to invest in, and I'm fussy about anyone that I invest in. That's something that I've learned guardianship of my own space and my own time, and I'm ruthless about it, unapologetically now. You know, I'm not a dick about it, but I'm like, you know, you're gonna have to impress me for me to want to forge and take time out of my life to, you know, to invest in you, frankly. And people, it's not that hard to do, but in this sort of bizarre, narcissistic kind of world, it's like I think we're losing that art of adding enormous value to people's lives. So, yeah, fire, the shared fire, it's something that I feel really strong.
I think we've lost a lot of things, like even our conversation now about the masculine and the feminine. Like that to me, when I listen to people talking and I hear people sharing about themselves, I think even those concepts, and maybe because they are quite fluid too, but like actually knowing yourself and knowing what that means for you, knowing what it means. And like, even I ask a lot of my clients, have you ever decided how you want to be loved? And it's like, oh, no, and these questions, like you talk about questions, like what sort of man or what sort of woman, what would they look like? What would they be like? Like this conscious questioning of what I actually really want in my life, and what is it in me that's attracting certain people, or what is it in me that I need to embrace more of? So as a woman, like I know that I've been very masculine being in this world. So much of my masculine has been driving. In my first relationship, that was the driver. And for me, I've had to really learn about myself so that I can come back into balance. And I think that is, there's just so much information around, and I don't even think, like, even the talk of divine feminine, like people use those terms, and people use a lot of terms, but do we really know what they mean?
Yeah. Well, I feel like symptomatically that our culture, in the absence of embodied spaciousness, and what I mean by that is humans spending time in nature. Because where else do you experience spaciousness with other humans, other than, getting drunk at Christmas with your family, or going to the footy, or whatever, going on a holiday with your family, or whatever the case may be. But it's like, the deepest sense of community. And I've led hundreds of expeditions, week-long expeditions, and 10 days and 12 and whatever, into the Tarkine. By orders of magnitude, the greatest sense of community that I've ever experienced is humans sitting in the wild together around fire and walking together in stillness, in silence, nervous systems merging with life perspective attained, higher level of consciousness in terms of conversation. Everyone is engaging at a level of like next level. I started a social enterprise company called Tarkine Trails, and we ran that company for 12 years, and I led hundreds of expeditions with that company. And I guarantee you, every single group, and I'd take out double income professionals, wealthy intellectuals, blah, blah, blah. It was incredible. I had a ball for years, 12 years guiding with Tarkine Trails, and then we sold it. But every single group, every single time, you know what they'd say? They'd say, we're so lucky. This group of people just bonded. It was amazing. The mix was just perfect. And what I wasn't telling them was, that's what every single group says. So what's actually going on with that dynamic? What's really happening if we get precise with it? I'll tell you what's really happening. Humans are just going into nature, and they're realizing the disarming effect that nature has on the human condition.
Mm-hmm.
And humans are suddenly experiencing meta-consciousness, life perspective. They're engaging about meaningful topics because they're not distracted by bloody phones and bills and mortgages and pinned to the grindstone of a boring, meaningless life where they're devoid of a sense of purpose. And so, in terms of, this conversation that you were just having, Lisa, in regard to, like our culture is so devoid of the time to consider these things. That the spaciousness internally is a direct mirror of the world around us. And so creatively, my response to that is aligned with my purpose. It's like, okay, be a bridge between nature and culture. Get as many human beings over the course of my life into nature and build a nature-informed culture.
Yes.
As a microcosm, where we're a community that recognise the value of continual pilgrimages into the landscape. So above and beyond people coming on a program with me. So now Ronnie, for example, this is not something that we naively expect people continue to pay us to do that, every time. No, that's not what we want. We want to be a funnel for humans to recognize these experiences. So Ronnie now feels like a really good friend of mine. He feels like a brother. We're bonded enormously, right? And so Ronnie, I'm going to go to Melbourne and visit Ronnie, and we're going to go and visit the cattle farmer that we met that was that lived next door to Hanging Rock. We're going to do this little pilgrimage to Hanging Rock because we had this incredible night at the pub with this dude, Andrew, this big cattle farmer from Hanging Rock. And I'd always watch that film, Picnic at Hanging Rock, and me and Ronnie were like, what? So it forges this sense of community, and as an antidote to that lack of spaciousness, to consider these essential things. Because how else do we do it?
Yeah, I love that, Darvis. It's amazing because actually it very mirrors in my experience. I was talking to Britt in the last interview about how, like, I grew up in the countryside in a very small little village under the Black Stairs Mountains in County Wexford, and very, very small farming rural community, and was just nature really was. And it was called the Rav Yew Tree, so it's like the yew tree is kind of a spiritual connotations, but we played there all the time. It was all mythical, like we kind of lived a mythical childhood nearly, and we, there was a lot of religion, there was mythic, the myths, and then in the legends, and then nature, and community. And it was just, it just had, you were part of something. You were part of community. I grew up like that, and then when I kind of had this kind of wanderlust to go out into the world and to live in, different countries and do different things, whatever. And then I noticed, like, then I suppose got to a point where I had this calling, and it was back to nature. And it was very much like that sense of what I had as a child was called me back. Had to call me back into silence and back into connection with nature again, because it was like it wanted to talk to me, and it was like it was wanting to tell me something that had to, inform me of, So I went into kind of retreat. Well, I was still, in my life as such, but I was very in a retreated state, for about 4 years, where I was in introspection in my inner landscape, as I call it, but with the use of nature as my guide. And then after that, I spent a lot of time actually bringing teenagers, like friends of my children, my own children, see them coming alive in nature as well, and taking them out of, even though we lived in Dublin, but we spent a lot of time in the West, and, back to the elements, back to, the fireplace, the hearth, back to, the wild, feeling the elements, feeling the wind, feeling the air, getting wet, getting soaked, like living in, in the sea all the time, and how they just blossomed out of that was unbelievable. And then I could see, like, children that had been in Dublin, had never actually never had a connection with nature before. Their families grew up in Dublin and never had that connection, coming in, taking them for weekends, and just, giving them wetsuits and giving them whatever they needed. But all I did was to facilitate it again, open, have the fire in the cottage going, have the meals, really hearty meals, letting them to go out into nature and just enjoy it. And a lot of them who were suffering with anxiety and, depression and addictions to phones and stuff like that, they straight away, it just fell away, and they just absolutely came alive, went horse riding, doing things, pushing themselves out of comfort zone, realizing that, yes, they were getting very cold and wet and everything, but they loved it, this richness come back into life, and that aliveness, and always went away different, and then always remembered that, like, even years later, still talking to me about it. Oh, remember, Caroline, the time we went to the cottage? Remember the time and it's just like, it's so life-changing for people, and I mean, it's amazing to think about the people that you've brought on that journey as well, because it's so life-changing, just to have that journey of self-discovery is just fabulous, and with other people, the bond that you create there too, so exciting, really. And it's amazing to hear. It's like it's just a natural thing that when you open yourself up to that presence of nature, that it does its work, on you, doesn't it?
It does, and it's cool that you're talking about taking kids into nature, because one of the things overlapping what I've been doing for the last 10 years, I've been working with kids at risk, like hardcore 8 years at the coalface in residential care, and then 3 years. So wards of the state, you know, kids that have been removed from their parents by the state government because of the lack of safety that they've got due to a whole range of traumatized kids, basically. And intensively in residential care for 8 years. So basically working with the children that the world doesn't want in institutional housing. So like 4 kids to a house with 6 staff rotating in rostered care surrounding around the clock. And so what I did as my creative response to that was create bush adventure therapy programs for these kids. And, you know, the amount of bureaucracy, the amount of obstacles and barriers in the way to do that was enormous, because these kids are violent. You know, it's normal for these kids to be violent. They'll just as soon as stab you as give you a hug. You know, if they snap, they've got attachment disorder, you know, so their brains aren't operating. Their brains literally aren't operating. They've got brain damage. Yeah. It's a sad reality. And so, you know, at each and every interval of these programs, working with the Salvation Army, working with Catholic Care, Life Without Barriers, I started a bush adventure therapy program for the kids. And you know, constantly, you know, the work is trying to get these kids into, you know, counselling. I'm like, the kids aren't going to fucking counselling, mate. Like, they're far more interested in smoking dope in their room than going to. I don't want to go to a formal counsellor. Yeah. I'll go to a therapist that I know that I've got a solid relationship with. But these kids don't know these humans. They don't see that they've got a problem. But you put a lure in front of them called go racing at a go-kart track. But in order to go racing at the go-kart track, the carrot, you've got to come camping with us for 3 nights. You know, then that's something that will get them there. And then when they get there, I remember going with this one particular young fella, and it's, you know, it's emotional even talking about it because he was super close to me. Yeah, haven't talked about him for a long time. But I took him into the Tarkine for like 4 days. And it was an enormous amount of effort to get him there. And he'd never done anything remotely like it. Him and this lass that was in the house with us, she'd been in there for years, and she was wild. I won't mention names. And I took him away, and he whinged and he bitched and he moaned the entire time until I got him down to Corinna. And he's like, it's going to be shit. It's going to be shit. I'm like, dude, because I can just talk the talk with the kids, you know. I love getting with them. I'm like, dude, you're going to love it, mate. Just shut up. Like, and when you get there, believe me, you'll love it. It's going to be shit. It's going to be shit. Let's turn around. We rock up into this old gold mining town in the middle of an ancient rainforest with this massive wild river. And he looks at me and goes, is this it? I'm like, yeah. He's like, this is fucking sick, bro. I'm like, yeah, we can go fishing. Can we go in the canoes? I'm like, yeah, dude. You know, can we go on that? Yeah, that's what we're here for. He's like, this is sick. And 3 days. And he's the most incredible stand-up comedian, this kid, right? He was so smart, so witty. And at the end of the trip, he's coming home. We're driving home, and we're doing stand-up gigs together, stand-up sets, and jokes are flying. And it's the most he's bonded with an adult in his entire life since he was removed from his family. And we get home, and all the staff are like, "What have you done with this kid?" I'm like, "No, it's not what I did with the kid. It's what the place did with the kid. We just took him home." Now, the shadow side of that is that when you take kids out into landscape, you take anyone out into landscape, but you can't replicate the experience. You can create a peak high in life that can't be embodied in day-to-day life, because we always know there's not going to be enough money or enough time to do it again. So it becomes this romantic kind of nostalgic memory. And so the essential antidote, once again, for that is to actually create a culture beyond the initial journey that captures one as a net to say, cool, we're going to continue to do this, you know. And so now all the people that are coming with us are building communities, and now they're taking out their kids, and we're looking at doing family camps. Now we'll give you all the tools. Now you take out your mates, go out on annual reflective weekend a month with your friends, leave the grog at the door, have a campfire, pass a talking stick around, check in, how are you going, how's life, be honest, express the vulnerability. It's courageous to do that. You know?
Yeah.
And so this is the challenge, you know, with, yes, it's incredibly disarming for all of us, especially children. But the challenge is really, what do we do to ensure that this is a stable part of our lives? I mean, in evolutionary terms, 99% of our evolutionary existence has been living alongside the natural world, hand in hand. Profound, intimate understanding of place, where to harness water, how to hunt, stealth, walking silently, night walking, setting shelter, making fire, diving in the ocean. The Aboriginal women of West Coast Tasmania, you know, 45,000 years of occupation, the longest isolated people in human history, 10,000 years isolated at the point of the last ice age on this island. And the Aboriginal women would protect themselves in seal fat, and midwinter would dive for abalone on the west coast of Tasmania. They could stay under for 3 to 4 minutes underwater. The men would never go in the water, the men would hunt. This is extraordinary level of resilience. You know, this is, but we've all evolved alongside the fireplace. And so when you go back in the mythology of Ireland, you know, in your own home, Caroline, it's like, you know, a roadmap to meaning.
Yes.
Of your own ancestral line and your own indigenous line.
Absolutely. And they all marry up, you know, that's the wonderful thing about it. Then I took a year to kind of research the whole map of, you know, human thought throughout time, from ancient times and all different cultures and all the way up to where we are now, including religion and different, you know, psychology and, you know, Freud and everything. But it all kind of ends up marrying up, especially with the cultures, that the understanding of nature and connection with nature, connection with self, the inner landscape not being different from the outer landscape, is really like quantum physics and everything we're talking about now today. You know, it's just the ancient becoming contemporary is where we're at, you know, and we understand the synchronicity with ourselves as one human consciousness, because the reality is that there's only one human consciousness, and once we kind of become synchronized with that ourselves, and then we can become synchronized with, in harmony with the natural world as well. That's when we all work together as one, and it's kind of like we can flourish as a culture and society, you know. And it's the only way. That's the only way. That's the only way. There's no other way than that. And it's whoever, you know, once people come on purpose, that's always going to be a facet of that, you know, in whatever I suppose expression that they're uniquely able to bring to the world in their, you know, life experience or skills or talents, whatever, but bringing us back into that harmony and oneness of purpose, and, you know, that connected, unified conscious awareness is really what everybody's purpose is about. You know what I mean? That's a big homecoming, you know. So it's just the more people that are doing that and that are connecting together like that in community, like you talked about, you know, is going, or like the cogs in the wheel, you know, where it all starts to work together like a Swiss watch, you know. It's very refined, but it's doable. But it's just, yeah, it's so amazing to see how it works, you know, and how, in a lot of ways, how simple it is, you know, when we can come back to what's true, you know.
Yeah, and if we're to go back to the title of this piece, you know, what a woman really needs, like the universal version of that is exactly what you just said: belonging, union, community, purpose. It's like I don't know any woman that would say that they don't want these things. In terms of how the archetypal wild man, and I'm one of millions, can play a role in that. It's like, I feel like, you know, I'm a human that can very capably get communities of humans into the wild to remember this. The place is the place is the guru.
Yes.
You know, if like I'm the glorified donkey, really, when it comes to, you know, and there's a whole bunch of there's a whole bunch of tricks to the trade in terms of me downloading some life learned life learned distinctions poetically that support people to speed up the process of connecting with the essence of themselves. Because so I can guide others in that through my own experience with myself. It's no guarantee that it always works for every human. There's no kind of cut and paste prescription. I've got to be very creative in the way that I do that. And I've got to have a crack, and I've got to fumble and play. And some people, like Ronnie, for example, was a man that was so deeply ready for that leap. You know, he was so profoundly ready for that leap. In fact, we've just finished editing his own documentary. We shot a film of him out there. I did. And he took his own little camera, and his documentary, I just watched it. It's a 15-minute long documentary of his journey. So there's a man that has had zero exposure to these fundamental self-reflective tools and distinctions, archetypes, you know, eye language, masculine, feminine. Ronnie was just completely walking blind in that way. But a man with a huge heart and a huge passion and an incredible amount of life experience, you know. And so just quickly upgrade the operating system and just go bang, 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 bang. Remember that, and facilitate some processes where Ronnie had to lead out there, not me. Now you do this, and now let's jam this out somatically. How did that go? I'll be the feminine, you're the masculine. We played with that out there, like a blindfold kind of night walk. And all of, you know, cramming as much intense experience in as possible, so you could go, my head just blew with all of this stuff. And he's walked away with an enormous amount of tools because he's made the time and the space to get himself into spaciousness, to get internally spacious, and to get someone who's got a gift with the gab, me, and a lot of experience in that space to help. Okay, yeah, what about this? And just jam and be his buddy. And he's walked away as a transformed human being. So it doesn't take an enormous amount. The sad thing is that people just don't know it's available and it's on tap. You know, it's just like it's right there.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love what you say as well, the fact that it's right in front of your eyes, you know, that it's just here, and it's always there, you know, and it's just the looking and the listening. And it's the same in relationships then as well, isn't it? How that skill gets translated over to when you know, to the in relationship, in that relationship, it's the listening and the looking and just trying to see beyond the obvious, you know, trying to get down to the truth of the person, you know, and being really curious, having that curiosity as well, you know, that being really, 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 really curious about, okay, there's one layer, and then is there another layer I can get under, another layer, and another layer that you can, you know, that constant curiosity.
And even holding yourself, like this is what I'm hearing you say, Darvis. It's like the capacity for us to know ourselves and hold ourselves in relationship, because otherwise what happens is if I'm totally reactive and I become needy, that is very unattractive and it's very unhealthy for a relationship. And that's the same whether I'm a male or a female. So a man that's overwhelmed and it's getting in that he doesn't know what to do either, that's just not attractive. And yet if you can hold yourself and you know, like you have a sense of belonging to yourself, then you can hold that space, you know. And what I'm hearing, Darvis, is that nature is a great way, and maybe even a fast track way of really coming into belonging in yourself, so that you feel that. And for me, like just feeling that essence of who I am when I'm in relationship with another person means I don't get lost. I don't end up jumping off my ship and, you know, just being a little deckhand on their ship, because I always have this sense of myself. And that, I think that is what you're talking about, that homecoming, that coming back to your essence, and then from there working out in your relationship.
Yeah, and that embodied sense of sovereignty is born completely naturally when we go back into a genuinely wild place that completely disarms us. And look, you know, I've done a lot of things in my life. I've never experienced a speedier transformational process than humans getting into the wild that I've done. I know a lot.
Yeah.
Pretty much everything. But, you know, all the great gurus of our history all went into nature. So for me, you know, this doesn't apply necessarily to everybody, but I'm just into getting rid of the middleman.
Absolutely. But actually, I think that's the contemporary way. Actually, for me, I feel there's no need for that. I think there's a time where now it's like middleman. That's the part of the evolution. Like the middleman has been taken out of it. There is there's an opening as such, a gateway now opening. But and it's amazing actually, I suppose for yourself as well, that you have people coming that are at that readiness, that stage of ripeness, you know, because it takes that willingness for transformation.
It does, and I think the thing that, like when I was running Tarkine trails, it was a transformational tourism business, but people weren't signing up for a transformational journey with intent. They were signing up for a holiday. They got a transformational journey because when they're out there, we didn't give them any choice.
Yes.
You know, we were facilitating council of all beings and deep silent walks and oms around the campfire and whatever, kumbaya, if you like. And but you know, the distinction between someone coming for that and coming deliberately for growth means that the outcome is it's chalk and cheese.
Oh, such a great conversation. We have already hit our hour mark.
Goes quick.
Yeah.
Goes very quick. Very juicy conversation. So I think we might wrap up here. Darvis, would you like to let everyone know where they can find you? Because if you're like me, you're thinking, how can I get into the wilderness now with Darvis? So you better let people know how they can find you.
Yeah, so people can just look me up on Facebook. My personal page has got a Darvis Walker on Facebook is where most people contact me. But NatureCulture is the master enterprise that myself and Britt have started. So NatureCulture basically runs a 6-month program for men called The Leap, which is a group of men, a 6-month program for women called The Longing, and then we do like 10-day, 12-day intensives in the Tarkine forest over the summer, on the coast. And now, because I took out Ronnie, I'm like, wow, the one-on-one journeys are awesome. So now I really love the idea of doing that as well. So NatureCulture on Facebook, one word. And yeah, or just come directly to me through Darvis Walker on Facebook and send me a message on Messenger.
And I'll put those links in the bottom of the post too. So you're easy to find. Darvis, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I really enjoyed this conversation.
It was amazing, Darvis. Absolutely loved it. And I'm also wondering, did any couples merge from the two different groups, the female and the male, yourself and Britt's groups?
Actually, so we do a mixed gender journey called The Conversation, which inevitably ends up with humans getting together.
Yeah, that's nice because a lot of like-minded people. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's an opportunity to meet people that are in that space as well that are interested in that. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, added value there. Okay, Darvis, that's amazing.
Yeah, get rid of those online dating. Just get down to the Tarkine with Darvis and Britt. There you go. There's the solution.
Process. It's a brilliant filtration mechanism.
Yeah, exactly. Great way to end it. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Darvis.
Darvis. We'll have you on again, Darvis. Definitely. It's just the tip of the iceberg. See you all again. Bye.
Bye.